Friends, it's so good to be here with you today. I am so excited to get to share um, the word of the year process that I use. This is a recording of a webinar that I gave, and I am excited and delighted to get to share it with you. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we will get started. Okay, hang on just a second while I get my notes back up. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So welcome to the Word of the Year. This is about how to choose and use it. And again, thank you for coming. I am excited to be here, and I want to thank Allie Edwards, who is the person who introduced me to the one-word concept. I got to know Allie Edwards, during the years that I owned a scrapbook store. She would come and teach classes. And this is one of the classes that she taught all those years ago. And she is still offering a Word of the Year class that I recommend if you want to be creative with your word and have monthly prompts and use photos and words to help understand it better. I still take her class. And so I would recommend that to you too. But we're going to talk about kind of how to choose and use your word. So there is no right or wrong way to apply what you're learning today. All of this is for your personal growth. And so you want to choose the things that work for you. You can pick and choose from all the information that I give you. There are a couple of questions that come up for my clients regularly when they are using this. Let me go through a couple of them, see if those are your questions too. One of the first questions I get is, can I choose more than one word? And the answer to that is, this is your process. You can do what you want. Now, I've tried it and it didn't work for me because I lost some focus. And so you go ahead and try it and see what works for you. Another common question that I have is coming from people who regret that they didn't stick with it for the entire year. So to you, I want to say, look at the parts that you did use and what worked for you, and try not to worry about whether life got in the way and you stopped doing it, just couldn't keep up with it. That's totally okay. Life happens. And did you get what you needed out of it, the parts you did? And there's another year coming up in just a year. You can try again. So don't worry if you didn't use it exactly perfectly or the way that you envisioned. I have one last question that people ask repeatedly, and that's, what if I choose the wrong word? And there's no right and wrong. If you choose a word that, and in a month it's not working for you at all and you don't like it, it's not bringing you any growth, you don't feel like it's the right word, okay, get rid of that word and choose another one. You don't have to stick with something that doesn't work. I've discovered that it is a real human characteristic that when we learn these beautiful tools, and they are beautiful and they can make our lives so much better, that it's human nature that we turn them on ourselves and use them against ourselves, use them to feel guilty or worried or whatever. Just try not to do that. Let it be a beautiful process for you. Now, there is a workbook that goes with this webinar. If you were part of the webinar, then you already have the workbook. If you're seeing this later, email us and we would love to send you the workbook. And finally, I want you to really pay attention while you're listening today. One of the best pieces of advice that I got from a teacher was that it was kind of my job when I came to a class to make sure that I got what I came for. And it changed my whole perspective on the class from being kind of somebody consuming to being an active participant, looking and searching for what it is I wanted from that. And so that's an invitation that I'm going to extend to you, that you consider this and decide beforehand what it is you want from it, and then make sure that you get what you came for. I am Jennifer Barnhart, and I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother. I am a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am a life coach, and I am a Word of the Year finder since 2006. And these are the words that really have guided my life over the last many years, since 2006. I work with women who belong to my faith who are struggling with who they are after something has really rocked their world. In many cases, the women I work with have had children who have left the church, and they are fearful for them and sad for themselves, and they're questioning whether or not they were good mothers. And I teach them tools that help them understand themselves on new levels, and learning to choose and use a word of the year is a tool that I teach that helps you develop your strength. At the end of this webinar, I will just spend about 5 minutes talking to you about how you can work with me and become a wholehearted woman. So let's get started. It's always nice to know why. So why do I choose a word of the year? And the answer is so simple for me. It's because I am a better person since I started this practice. My word is not my goals. My word is something that I apply to my goals. My word is not about faith. My word is not about money. My word is not about relationships. It's not about my job or my family, but it is something that I can apply to every one of those categories. And in doing so, like I said, I find that I become a better person. What I've discovered is that the process that I've created is what I think creates the results that I've been enjoying. So the process is a 5-step process, and it's pretty simple. The first one is discovery, which is discovering your word. The second one is getting acquainted with your word. The third one is remembering your word. So remembering to use it throughout the year. The fourth one is be aware, become aware. And the fifth one is be aware of the results, see your results. What you're doing in this process is learning to strengthen your skills and talents and quiet down your critical voices. So I have found that there are 2 ways that you can discover your word. The first one is you go find your word, and we're going to talk about the process, how to do that. That's the first thing that we'll do. And the second one is that your word comes and finds you. Now, I have some in the workbook. We've gone past the page where it describes the process. On the very next page, it says discovery at the top. These are the things that I want you to fill in. I am going to read them out loud. You are going to write them down. Do you need this handout? Not necessarily. Just grab a piece of paper and write your answers on it. And I am not going to stop and wait for you. You can stop this recording so that you have time to write. And that actually is one of the things that I got back in feedback back, is that people wanted to have more time to write. With this recording, you're welcome to stop the recording. This is the process that I use to find the word myself. And just a couple of days ago, I took my husband through the process, and he has been a real skeptic about this. He's watched me choose a word for years and years, but as soon as I started asking him the questions, he came up with a word almost instantly. So let's see how that works for you. What you're doing is waking up your brain, sort of priming a pump. You're asking it some questions and getting it to start thinking. So here is the first first word. And I am going to stop that screen sharing right then so that you can take a look at me. And I'm just going to ask you the questions. Again, under discovery, the first page, look back on the last year, list the highlights. And you don't have to come up with a ton, although it is fun to spend a little time with this and fill up a whole sheet because you forget how many highlights there were in a year. So what are your highlights? What were your happiest moments? And again, writing this with your hand, there's something about that process that helps us to really connect with our brain. The connection between our hand and writing and learning is a really strong one. So what were your happiest moments? Also looking back on the past year, what were your saddest moments? When you're ready to look forward, what do you want more of in this next year? And for us right now, that's 2022. What do you want more of in your life in 2022? What do you want less of in 2022? And the last journaling question is, what really lights you up and makes you feel excited, recharged, or contented? So when you read back over your answers, what you're looking for are some patterns that you see, or some highlights, or just something that jogs your brain. You may not see your word yet, but you're just starting to kind of figure out what it is you want next year. So we're going to turn to the next page, which is also a discovery page. And if you will see there that there are 9 different categories. And again, I'm going to read them to you. And within each category, I want you to make a note of what you would like more of next year and what you would like less of. So starting with your own physical and mental health, what would you like more of? What would you like less of? The next category is marriage and romance. And then family. And when I filled that out, I filled it out with my immediate family. My marriage relationship came in the previous category, but my children and my grandchildren and siblings and nieces and nephews, that's where I would put in the family category. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? The category next is about money. How is money working for you? What would you like more of when it comes to money? I'm sure we would all like more money, but how to manage your money or how to spend your money, and what would you like less of? The next category is career. And for people who don't have a regular career now, this would be how you spend your time during the day. If you're a volunteer, if you're doing service for people, think about it, how you spend the bulk of your day, the hours that you spend in your day. If your career is full-time homemaking, then that would go in here. What would you like more of or less of in your current career? Spiritual development. What do you have? What's working now? But what would you like more of? And what would you like less of? Relationships. And with those, we've already talked about our family, both our immediate family and our extended family, but we have relationships all around us. Some of my favorite relationships occur when I go to the swimming pool in the mornings. So think about people that you have relationships with. These can be people through church, these can be people through work, but what would you like to do with some of those relationships, those friendships or casual friendships? What would you like more of? What would you like less of? Recreation. We all need a little recreation in our life. That would also could be called leisure time, or basically when you're just when you're just by yourself. So so for me, sometimes that includes things like creative endeavors. So what would you like more of? What would you like less of? And finally, the last category is personal development. How would you like to develop yourself this next year? What would you like to spend your time doing more of? What would you like to do less of? So as you've been filling this out, there's a little category in the very bottom that says, write down any words or ideas or feelings that you notice after you've been filling in the box, and especially pay attention to any patterns that you're seeing. Okay, let's go back to sharing that screen. Here we go. Actually, didn't really want to do that. I'm going to stop that one more time. Okay, because we're still using this workbook. So the next sheets in this workbook are some potential words that you might use. These are words that I have collected, words that I've seen other people use. And of course, there's many, many, many more besides that. But I want you to take that page, go through the words, and circle any that just really you feel a strong resonance with. And feel free to add any words that you want to use that may not be in here. When you get down to this section, at this point, some people know exactly what their word is. And if you already know it, go write it down here, because believe it or not, you can decide it and then forget it. So you want to have it in a little spot where you can find it again if you want to continue to use it, if you want that growth from it. Okay, so that is how the process that you can use to discover your own word. It might happen in an instant, which is how I've seen several clients recently. They've just found in an instant after we've done those journaling activities. Or it can take a couple of days to work on thinking about it, but don't take too long, because we've talked before. There's not a perfect word. There's not one perfect word. You can have a wonderful year with many words. Okay, now I am going to share that screen, because the next part of the process is where your word finds you. And I want to share with you the exact process where that happened for me in 2014. In 2014, our family realized that it wasn't possible for our parents to live on their own anymore. And I stayed with them for several weeks while we made arrangements for them to be moved closer to more family members. My word that year was grace. And I needed grace so much that year. I needed it when I was working with my parents. I needed it when I was working with my siblings. We all wanted what was best for our parents, but we didn't all agree on what that was. I needed grace for myself and for my own family. Our lives were turned upside down in an instant, and I needed the comfort that thinking about and asking for grace brought me. As I was nearing the end of 2014, I felt like I had been flattened by a steamroller. And it was in that mood one day that I was listening to different versions of the hymn, Amazing Grace. That's because one of the ways that I remember my word is by is by choosing some songs that will help me remember it. So I was listening to different versions of the hymn Amazing Grace. And my daughter shared a version with me by the Piano Guys on YouTube. And it was a mix of Amazing Grace and Rachel Platten's Fight Song. And it was in that instance, as I was listening to it, I was on YouTube and I had the other screen. As soon as I heard the music to Fight Song, I brought up the lyrics on my screen. And it was in that moment I found my word for 2015. And I want to recreate that moment with you because it was so powerful for me. And it might be an example of how you could see where a word hunts you down, finds you, and attaches itself to you. So the lyrics to that song, the final lyrics are, I still have a lot of fight left in me. And that was the phrase that really touched my heart and helped me choose the word fight. Now, both of my parents passed away in 2015. My dad passed in January and my mother in July. And I found myself in my kitchen a lot that year, dancing and singing singing to the top of my lungs that fight song. I needed every ounce of courage and strength that I could muster to be okay that year. And it didn't end after the funerals. In a large family of 9 kids, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made collectively after the death of your parents. And it was challenging, to say the least. But for me, remembering that I still had a lot of fight left in me kept me going, both figuratively and literally. So you may have this experience where you actually have a word that you see over and over again. And in your workbook, there's a page to help you kind of focus yourself, if that's the way that it happens. Is it, a word that comes and finds you and attaches itself to you. So now so at this point, you should have a pretty good you should have a pretty good idea of what your word for the year. Oh, hang on. At this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what your word for the year is. And now I want us to talk about some of the ways that we can get acquainted with it. And again, this is a process that I follow each year. And this is a lot like what it looked like for me when I chose the word last year, wholehearted. I looked up several dictionary definitions, and I wrote them all up and down on a sheet of paper, several sheets of paper, actually. And as I looked up all the dictionary definitions, I was trying to find the definition that came closest to what type of growth I was looking for. And so for wholehearted, it was an adjective, which means it's a describing word. Unconditional and enthusiastic devotion, open and genuine, not deceitful, earnest and heartfelt, focused and determined, sincere, willing to experience all the emotions that come with having a human heart. That was the definition that I was going from. And you can see when you do a process like that, that there are some other words that are close to that word that sometimes give you a lot more meaning, a fuller meaning of your word. Now, the antonyms that I looked at were half-hearted, and that meant a lot to me because I would contrast what does it mean to be half-hearted, what does it mean to be wholehearted. So that was an important word that I remembered last year, as well as heartless or hard-hearted. And I found that sometimes I really struggled with softening my heart, and so kind of realizing that the opposite of what I wanted to be was hard-hearted. Some synonyms that I liked that I kept were heartfelt, heartwarming, heartbreak, heartache, big-hearted, disheartened, heavy heart, cold heart, warm heart, soft heart, hard heart, true heart, and tender heart. And just kind of letting all of those words kind of roll around helped me. Again, I think I've already described it, gave me a fuller sense of what that meant. In addition to that, I use journaling a lot to help me kind of focus where I'm at, get to know myself better. Journaling is one of the tools that I teach. It's one of the tools that I use. And so in your workbook, there are some journal questions, but you don't have to have those questions. A lot of times I would write my word at the very top of my journal paper, and I would just ask myself, how am I feeling? How does my heart feel? What parts of my heart am I feeling? And what I was doing that year was allowing myself to actually feel, to start feeling what that felt like. And that's where I realized that to be a wholehearted woman, that you have to be able to feel your grief as well as your joy. Now, going on to feeling your word, that this might be the hardest thing for me to describe and for you to do, but it's really worth doing a little bit, even if you're awkward or can't do it very well. It is many of our nature to not feel our feelings, to dismiss them, to push them away, to be hard-hearted, to lock them away. And so I have tried some exercises this year where I get down on a mat and I just practice feeling my word. And one of the easiest things that I have started with is telling my face to show what it is I'm feeling, and so when I see family members at a party and I feel that love come up, to actually demonstrate that love for them on my face, being glad to see them, being happy, putting the love into my face. So actually taking your word and letting your face reflect it. And then after I've tried that reflecting with my face, and I then allow my body, and I will go ahead and stop that screen share so you can see me, but I would allow my entire body to feel some of those emotions. So my word for this year is fun. And so I've already been trying to think, if somebody's having fun And it's really cool to go look at babies or puppies. Puppies are so good at that. When they are having a good time, they are delighted. Their whole body moves all over. When you see babies, they're using their arms. There is, you can see them clapping their hands. Their entire body gets involved in what they're feeling. And what you're trying to do with all of these exercises is to lock those feelings inside yourself so that you are very familiar with them, that you memorize them, and you can recreate them at will, actually, throughout the year when you need them. You know what it feels like to have fun. You know what it's like. The year that I discovered how to feel joy has been one of the most productive feelings for me to understand how that feels. And the way that that happened for me was I live in a beautiful place where I live just at the top of a beautiful valley. And I drove one morning, early in the morning. It was sunshiny. It's not, I live in the Northwest. It's not normally sunshiny here. But as I turned left onto the road that goes down into the valley, the minute I turned left, laid out in front of me was this gorgeous, beautiful valley, river, mountains. Mountains were snow-capped. And inside myself, I all of a sudden felt this amazing, amazing, overpowering feeling. And I defined that as joy, that I was feeling joy. And it went away because our feelings usually only last about 20 seconds unless we refresh them. But once I felt that feeling and identified it, I have been able to use that feeling over and over and over again to recreate the feeling of joy. Okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint. And we're still, I think that we have finished our getting acquainted. And so we want to go to the next slide, and which is remember. And for me, this is show and tell time. Being able to remember and use that word all year, that's taken all of my creative skills. I know that I have a creative brain, and it likes being stimulated in the many ways that I can figure out how to help me remember this. And so for me, this is show and tell time, and I am going to show you some of the ways that I have used this to help me remember. Just starting with the very first word that I had was back in 2006 was the word breathe. And I actually had that word made out of vinyl, pretty big, pretty good size word. It was the word and it was the definition. And that, all these years later, is still up on the wall in my bedroom. And I have these words visible. I made them visible so that I can think about them often. If you'll recall, we talked about choosing and using. Well, using it is what helps us bring that process into our life and make it part of us. And that's where I find that I'm getting the growth, is by remembering. So last year, I'm not sure that I see what I've got. Okay, I'm going to show you several things that I have used. And this actually is not my Wholehearted necklace. I thought it was right here, and I'm sorry it's not, but it looks very much like this. It is pink quartz, but in the shape of a heart. And I had the heart was broken, and it was put back together with gold glue, which is the Japanese kintsugi method of repairing things with gold and making them even more valuable and beautiful after they've been broken. And I was kind of at the beginning of the year when I was doing Wholehearted, brokenhearted was part of the things that I was thinking about. And I had a necklace that I wore regularly, pretty much every day, that helped me to kind of remember that. That is not the only necklace. I have been doing a charm necklace. Let's see if I can get this where you can see it. A charm necklace for a number of years where I take a charm and have my word printed on it. And then I wear that necklace. And when I have it on, when I put my fingers around it and kind of think about it, I am either praying or meditating on what that word is meaning to me or how I am using it. Not the only way that I have those visible. I have a collection of hearts. I had a collection of hearts long before I started Wholehearted, but it has grown, and my plan is to eventually have my big heart collection on my wall, where I will be thinking about my hot wall in the hallway where I will walk by it every day. The year that my word was joy, I found a way to, and honestly, at Christmas time, that was the perfect time. I found several things that I picked up that I used, that I bought so that I could leave it around and see it and use it. That was my phone making a noise. I just turned it off. I had a wonderful dear friend who, the year that I had joy, made me this sign. It's up all the time. It helps remind me of my word. None of the words that I choose ever go away. They continue to bring growth to me. But the year that I have them everywhere. So, so I have heart-shaped. I have a lot of heart-shaped things. I am always collecting heart-shaped things every time I go to the store. But I keep these little hearts a lot of times in my pocket so that I can have them all the time. But I'm also spending time writing these things down. And one of the ways is that I had a bunch of cards made and that had my word and the other words that I was using to focus on for the year. These little cards were from persnickety prints, and that has been very helpful. I have a deck of cards that I sit in front of me in the morning and I flip through them, reading and going over not only my word, but my scripture and some I am statements. So it's kind of a little bit of a process that I have in the morning where I am centering on myself and taking care of my mental health. Now, I also took that same artwork and created a poster. And same thing, it's got my word of the year, my scriptures. It's actually the same thing as my cards, but I designed that poster. It lived on the back of my bedroom door, and every morning I would go and just read the words out loud. And so what I want you to do is that, for me, that was a very creative way of helping me make that word visible someplace and be able to remember it. In your workbook, on the remember page, there's a few other suggestions. You noticed with the fight song, I create a playlist of songs that will remind me of them, and then moving to them in my kitchen, having a little dance party, helps me again kind of move those feelings into my body. I find that I will hang on just a second while I remember the word. I find that I will be able to use my word a little bit better when I am looking again for those feelings. I remember, use them, and apply them. Now, I also do something that's called habit pairing, and that's where I have a morning routine that I do. It's pretty routine. I've been working on it for years, where I read my scriptures, do some journaling, that kind of stuff. In that time, I have a few minutes set aside each day to spend just a few minutes kind of writing about my word, thinking about it. And sometimes, I find different parts of my day. As soon as I open my eyes in the morning, I start this little routine where I recite the scripture for the year, where I remember who I want to be as part of that word, and then I start praying for my people. So when you habit pair it, what you find is that pretty soon being used, it becomes a habit. And that's where the growth is coming from for me, is that I have figured out how to remember and use these words really on a very regular, if almost every day, if not daily basis. And then once a month or so, I kind of go back and review. Were there any goals that were part of that? Is there anything that I've noticed? So just be real creative in how you find that you can remember it. Here we go. Okay, so our next slide talks about becoming aware. And I don't have a process for this. I frequently kind of remind myself to have eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to feel, and just become aware of what this is bringing into my life, to see it. In your workbook, there's a page, and it's just a journal page for you to jot down some of the places that you can become aware. And so that brings us to the final step in this process, and that is to recognize your results. Now, I realized this week that I have a very recent example of this, and I think it illustrates it perfectly. My sister has a son who is getting married. There was a short date. We only had 5 or 6 weeks from the time they got engaged to the time they got married was only 5 or 6 weeks. There had been several changes because it was over the holidays, several changes in dates. And my question, of course I was invited. The question was, am I going? So here were my thoughts. I didn't want to go because travel was going to be difficult in the weather. It's cold. I was going by myself. I didn't know all the details or all the places. I had an injury a little earlier this year. I've needed, and I will probably continue to need, a wheelchair in the airport. I'm going to be driving myself around in the dark and navigating the hotel and the airport. And all of those things were like, I don't want to do that. But then there was this other side where this is part of my extended family, and I have sort of made a commitment to myself that I wanted to show up for my family. And part of that was I want to attend as many of my family weddings as I can, not just because of my parents, although there was some of that, and the siblings, but my family showed support to me when my children were getting married. And I want to be the kind of person that shows that when it's my turn, I want to show up for them too. And so the question I asked myself is, what would a half-hearted person do? Well, they wouldn't go, but if I'm a wholehearted person, what would she do? And it was a no-brainer for me. It's like, okay, I'm going. But within that, the word that I have for this year that is changing that is that the next question is going to be for me is, I'm not just doing it because I have to, and I'm not doing it half-heartedly. my next question is, how can I make this be fun? Not just for me, but for the people around me. And that's where I find that I am learning to be the best Jennifer I know how to be. And it really has been because of all these words that I've used. And so I encourage you to take this process that I've got and use it and see how you can be a better person as a result of using those words. Now, I told you at the very end that I would kind of share for 5 minutes about how you can work with me. And so let's do that. I have a program called Becoming a Wholehearted Woman, and it's based on the 3 great commandments: to love God, to love others, and to love yourself. And this one word program is just one little tiny slice of the things that we learn in that Becoming a Wholehearted Woman. We learn to love yourself. We learn to put your physical, spiritual, emotional self on your list because you're worth it. And it's 12 weeks. You work one-to-one with me, and we work on the pieces that you want to develop. And you can think of it as kind of being a thinking and accountability partner. There's a lot of journaling, and there's workbooks just like this one. Now, that program is 12 weeks, and it's $1,500. And I know that that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And sometimes you wonder whether or not you would get what you really want out of it. And so I want to make you an offer of how you can try it out. You can try a little sliver of that Wholehearted Woman program with me. This little sliver, the one little word one, you can try it out. I will help you either map out your one word plan for 2022. I will help you by coaching you and also helping you with your planner. It's not your planner, your planning. Sometimes just planning it out, having a path to follow to get there. So it would be a 1-hour session. It's $49. And this offer ends soon. If you are watching this later, just email me or contact me if you would like to work with me. I would love to work with you and have you try me out and see if both coaching, but specifically bringing and inviting this one word of the year can come into your life and make the changes and help you become the kind of person you want to be, like it has for me. And thank you so much for being here. It has been really delightful to get to talk to you. And I hope I get to see you and know you again. And I hope I hear from you soon. So thank you again. And until later, I am going to be doing these webinars regularly with additional slices of that circle that I showed you. So hopefully we can get to know each other. Okay, I will talk to you later.